Welcome back, everybody. Today's lesson is going to be about hands and the many different components to a hand, especially if we're doing this from a construction method point of view. The hand shape is made up of three particular parts. We have the wrist here and the hand block here, curving across the knuckles, curving across the wrist. The wrist bones are made up of the radius bone and the ulna bone that are going to sit like this next to each other. And the hand is positioned inside of those bones to slide in these two particular directions. Then we have the finger portion, which from the palm, this is going to look longer because of the wrist extension to it. And then we have the finger part up here with all the fingers drawn together or adducted together. They sort of both together make something that feels like this, but rounded at both ends. We would take this end and divide it into four. We would take this end and divide it into four. Then linking the top and the bottom together gives us the channels for each of the fingers. And then we would think about the fingers: index, middle, ring, pinky. And you can see how those sort of go with the flow. There's going to be some reduction, but it's still a safe boundary line to place the fingertips in. Then the thumb is going to occupy this part of the palm, and it's going to extend out about, maybe a fifth of the way up the index finger, the two knuckles, and then into the palm. Now you could think of this in a few different ways. There's a comma shape, but that's only if the thumb is sort of against the hand like it is over here. Or that comma shape with the tail turned in the other direction. You can also think of the thumb as the shape of like a butter knife, like so, and then adding a circle on top of the little handle so that you have this shape for the thumb, and then you have this shape for the muscles of the thumb that sit within the palm. There's two other kind of fat pads in here. There's one across here that goes across the metacarpals where the fingers attach. And then there's the one that's over here on the pinky side that curves outward like so. These are muscles as well for the pinky finger. In fact, within the hand, the pinky and the thumb are the only two fingers within the hand that have actual muscles inside of the hand shape. Those are called intrinsic muscles, where the muscles stay within the shape and don't cross over out of the shape like all of our other muscles do. All of our other muscles go from one shape to the next shape. And the arm, the upper arm to the lower arm to the hand. The leg is the same way. And even the torso has the crossover muscles from one half to the other half. If we look through the hand, there's another arc this way. And each of the fingers within those divisions is something like this, with the thumb being down in here. Index, middle finger, ring finger, pinky, thumb. The shape of each finger, we would start at length, but then what we would do is find each of the knuckles and notice the distance for each knuckle is roughly 2/3 the length of the previous knuckle. Here is the primary knuckle. It sort of ramps down into the tendon, and the tendon crosses over into the finger, not very far, and then blends in with the rest of the finger. But that tendon goes all the way up to the fingertip. We just see it primarily breaking the edge right along in here. And of course that tendon goes all the way through back into the hand block. There's the fingernail, curve here, curve here. If we look through the fingertip is flattened in the front end, and the fingernail curves this way. So the fingernail is doing the same thing that the hand is doing. We have a curve this way, but we also have a curve this way. We have a curve this way, but we also have a curve this way. Then the middle knuckle and the distal knuckle. So this is called the distal portion, middle portion, and proximal portion. The middle knuckle here is made up of several lines. A couple at this end, one here, and then two larger ones. Sometimes they're joined together through here. And then in this part right up here, we have two lines that do something like this. This knuckle comes out farther on both sides, which makes the finger narrow, wide, narrowing as it goes out to the end of the finger. If we look at this finger from the profile view, we have where the knuckle is here, and the tendon that comes back off of that knuckle. And we have the palm pad, that's this portion right along in here, here. Then we have the divisions. The knuckle in here lifts up, and the knuckle here lifts up ever so slightly. Convex lines, a little dip, and the nail of the finger. Then on the underside, we have the pads. This one is more of a triangle-like pad that terminates behind the knuckle here, or below the knuckle. Then we have a flattened area through here, and then we have this curved portion here, which terminates above this knuckle. And this comes down and runs into this pad. These are divisions within the finger length, and then these are the divisions within the finger length. Now this, again, has the tendon that comes off of it in both directions. And with these, the way that they're designed, when we flex our finger like this is actually going to go up a little bit more through here. We have each segment, the fingertip, the length of the finger, fingernail through here, this knuckle here, this knuckle here. These two pads squeeze together, and this one pushes back. It's the same thing with our abdominal wall. When we flex forward, the upper and the lower abdominal wall both fold forward like this, and this one pushes back when we're leaned forward. So if this is our torso like this, and we're flexing this way, this is how the muscles are going to work in relationship to one another. On the underside of the finger, or the flexing side of the finger, the finger length, this is the index finger, the skin folds here over the next finger next to it, the middle finger. Then this goes down the hand this way. We have a primary fold here. We have a secondary fold here. At the middle knuckle, we have two folds that do this. And out here at the distal, we have a single fold, like so. Since this knuckle flexes more, it has two divisions, and the same with down in here. Because that flexes more, there's two divisions for the skin to fold. And because this flexes less, there's only one fold across to help with the stretching of the skin, or in this case, on the underside, the flexing of the skin. When we spread our fingers out through here, like so, we have to remind ourselves that there's spaces between each finger. The fingers don't run right into one another in the design of the hand. there's actually a space in between. So when we look at the hand here, there's small spaces between each of the fingers right along through here. When the hand is closed down, you don't really notice them as much, but when they spread out, you certainly notice that there's space between each. This has a curving web like so, and they all do, but these have a more flattened design to them, while this has a more curved design between them, between the middle and the ring finger. And these two don't spread as far as these two and these two. We could actually move this over just a little bit more and get a greater spread out of the four fingers. And then, of course, the thumb spreads this way, and the skin in here stretches along here. The webbing of our hand stretches. When we first designed the hand out at the end of the arm, depending upon the action of the hand, we're going to create a closure of sorts. So this again is the finger spread. The hand block is in here, and then the finger spread, something like this. I didn't spread these as far to be redundant in the same design, but it's connecting all of the fingertips together at their ends and then designing through. If the hand has the fingers curled but not completely flexed, then we might design the hand in a shape that's like this. So the hand block through here, and then the fingers are going to be doing something like this. Like if I'm scooping dirt, I'm creating a curvature like so. And then we'd put the thumb on there. If it's on the other side, we wouldn't see it. If it's over here, we'd put it on the underside here and then extend it out. If the hand is in a fist, we'll design it like a box. First the boundary, then the angle for the fingers where they're bent, then a curve across the knuckles, the thumb over here, then divide the fingers, then put the thumb in, and then design the folds. Then come back in and massage the knuckles through, add the elevation of the knuckles along in here, send the tendons back into the palm, or in this case the dorsal side, then find all the articulation points for tendons and bones. To draw each finger, I'm going to do this in 3/4 view again. We would make the divisions for each finger. Then, instead of thinking block or cylinder to start off with, we want to just basically work with each of these two corners and draw out from this one to this one, 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 making sure that we draw each length thoroughly before we close them off at the end. Then add the dimension to each one of them. Then the knuckles, then the nails, sticking with conforming to the block or the change in perspective between each of the segments. You might even put a pathway along here for each of the knuckles. These knuckles have a more flattened curve, and each set of knuckles as they go out farther becomes a little bit steeper in the curvature as they go across. So you could draw an arc here and an arc across here, and that would help track the other knuckles once we place those into the drawing. For younger hands, the fingers should remain smoother all the way through, both at the top and at the bottom. Maybe a little change in direction but not a great change. And as the finger ages, place more emphasis on the knuckles because the hand is going to thin down. The body fat is going to thin. You can still keep a curved line underneath here to start off with for rhythm, but depending upon how old the hand is, you may place a little bit more emphasis on each of the different pads to help strengthen that aged look, to make the hand feel just a tiny bit more skeletal. The actual bones inside the hand are narrower through here, but these outsides are the fatty tissue that helps fill in each of the fingers to make each of the fingers feel volumetric and thorough and tough and rounded and that sort of thing. And these are the parts as we age that start to thin down. And that's why you're seeing these sort of what look like concave spaces in between each knuckle. You'd still build them convexly, but you want to make sure that there's a narrowing of them in between. And all of this right here should be pushed back just a tiny bit, so each of the segments progressively gets shorter as it goes out to the fingertip. In the palm of the hand, we have folds, skin folds. We have one that comes along here, one that goes from the index finger side over towards the pinky and terminates against this pad right along in here, a small fold right in here, and then a large fold that goes along here. And then there's a few kind of vertical folds that come along through here on this part of the hand, but these are the most dominant folds. 1, 2, 3, 4. One from the pinky side, one from the index finger side, one between the thumb and the metacarpal fat pad, and then one along the thumb along through here. Those are your common skin folds on the inside of the hand. As far as rhythm goes, for a finger that's curled or bent, it's best to design the finger first with the curvature in mind, thinking about how much the finger might be curving from the hand. Then this side should remain curved to show the flow, while this side you would design the knuckles to show the structure. So more of a structural side up here along the dorsal side of the finger, while the underside where the fat pads are is going to have more flow and more curvature through it. And that's the same thing when you have a hand touching a surface. Whatever part of the finger is touching the surface, flatten it out so it feels like it's compressed against that surface. And this side is going to have all the structure, and this side is going to have all of the flow. Technically, this is everything that you're going to learn about the hand. There's some muscles to learn about, and then there's the plane structure to learn about. But as far as all the data, the information for all of the fingers, the fingertips, the knuckles, the knuckle lines, this is relatively everything that you need to learn about the hand. Then it's just a matter of putting one together in an orderly way to construct it, which I'll show you next. When designing the hand, you should have a little bit of the forearm included so that you're not just drawing the hand right at the point where it's attached to the arm, because it's important that you see the flow of it as it's going into the forearm, since the forearm dictates the movement of the fingers. Cylinder form with ellipses, just to remind us that we're looking through the form. We're not just looking at the surface, we're building through the surface. The hand block, the knuckle line, the elevation change of the thumb, the index finger, and then all the other fingers locked in between, sort of capturing the shapes as a whole. The space between the first two fingers and the spaces for the other fingers. Pointing out the index finger, the curvature for the middle finger, curvature for the ring finger, curvature for the pinky finger, looking at the distance between each of these to make sure that we have the right length for each one. then the underside of the index finger. Then we look for the knuckle ridge across here, making sure that we have an arc between all of them. The angle of the knuckles, the angle of the knuckle here. Fingertip is showing just a little bit more. I could probably lift this up and I could probably drop this down just a touch. Finding the knuckle divisions for the thumb, and then generating the design for those. Then finding the knuckles along here. I'm going to overlap the line along in each of these sections just a tiny bit, but I'm also going to emphasize the entire shape, even though I'm not going to draw the whole thing all the way around. The line for each tendon, the knuckles, folds along here, the folds along here, and finally where the knuckle's going to go here, the folds here, and then finally the fingernail. I'm going to draw the contours of each of these segments now. Do the same thing on this side. Find the contours. The nails on this finger and this finger. The pinky finger doesn't show the nail. The elevation of the knuckle here. The muscles on the side of the hand here. The crossover of the tendons from the forearm. The ulna bone rhythm. The radius bone rhythm. And then I'm going to flatten this out just a little bit more. Curve this outward. Lift this up. Find the thumb nail. And within just a few minutes, we have the entire shape of the hand because I built it in an orderly process. Now the only thing left to do is find a few of the shadow patterns, which in this case along here runs the length all the way back into the palm portion on the dorsal side. The shadow pattern drops down through here, runs into the ulna bone here. I'm just using a really simple standard gradient for the shadows for the time being. I'm not really getting too caught up in the emphasis of the shadows, trying to render them or anything. Shadow crosses over along here, cast shadows through here. So this is going to be a sharper side here, while these are going to be softer sides. That's why I'm letting the lines cross over. Do the same thing through here. Let the lines cross over. Darken all of this down into shadow. Darken all this down into shadow. Cross here, over the knuckle, back into the knuckle space. All of this darkens down. All of this darkens down. This entire finger is going to be in shadow. With an exception, there's a small edge right along in here that's actually in the light, but it's barely visible to the eye. Then on this finger, the shadow wraps around a little bit of the knuckle, along the length of the finger, around this knuckle, through the length of the bone here, and then under the nail. All of this drops into shadow. Cast shadow on this side from the index finger, then the underside of the thumb. It has a more reddish shadow to it because of the light that's coming from the palm, more than likely. And everything that's out here is vascular. And you want to be very careful how you accentuate that. The deeper you make those lines, or the darker and thicker you make those lines, the more aged the finger is going to look. Then there's also the little groove where the tendon cuts through along in here. We don't really see it on the other fingers as much. And then the knuckle in this finger is subdued, but I'm still going to go ahead and add just a tiny bit of shadow to it to give it a little bit more emphasis. And then the cast shadows along here, I'm going to push a little bit deeper and darker, and through this segment of the finger here, along in here, and on this side of the finger up along in here, just to really make sure that there's a little bit more depth within the shadows. And with these knuckles, because it's a female hand, I'd probably play down these lines just a little bit. Probably not push them as hard across the entire hand, because that's going to make the finger feel much more aged and less elegant looking and a little bit more rugged looking. And then there's also some lines up along in here that I would have to question whether or not I'd want to emphasize those at all. Then there's the shadow pattern along the edge of the arm here. These are muscles and tendons that we're seeing, causing these shadow patterns. And you can see the different pattern breaks through here. Then there's usually a half tone between the two bones through this section, which is why I'm darkening it. You can kind of see that right along in here in the reference. So this space right through here would be slightly more half-toned. And then you would also push more of a half-tone along this side to help turn the form, making it feel more block-like. And I just realized that this finger can come out just a little bit farther. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Remove the nail here on the hand. Round this out just a little bit more at the end. Drop in the fingernail so that we can see this side of the finger because we're looking down at that part of it. And then reestablish the shadow pattern. Now, the one thing I want to mention that maybe I didn't do the best job with is I'm overemphasizing the outlines of everything. You don't want the drawing to consist of some really heavy outlines. You want to trim those down. The reason being, we're not drawing a cartoon necessarily. We're trying to draw things a bit more realistically, and we don't have outlines around things. So we don't want to emphasize them in such a way where they're dark and obnoxious, the way these feel. You want to play them down just a little bit, let the tones take over, and control the forms. But for the sake of demonstration, to understand the breakdown of the forms, it is kind of important to be able to see those breaks, which is why I have a tendency to push the outlines for the sake of demonstration. In my own work, I don't play those up at all. Unless, of course, it's like a job with cartooniness in it. And then, of course, the outlines are going to be a pretty dominant part of the design. All right. So that's putting the hand together. Now, I know that this pose isn't a really complicated pose, and I also realize that these fingers are turned downward this way just a little bit more than I have them going outward this way. I could easily, and I will do this really quickly because it's digital. I'll take all of this and I'll rotate it slightly like this. And now the hand is a little closer. Actually, I could probably do that one more time here to rotate the hand into the correct position. Because this is a demonstration, I barely looked back and forth between the drawing and the reference. And because I understand the information, I don't have to look at the references much. If I'm doing this, though, for a piece of artwork, I certainly want to make sure that the contours and the design line process is well established in the pose or in the action of the pose as specifically and intentionally as possible long before I start into the rendering process, or else I'm going to find by the end of the rendering that there's a major problem with the design and major work is going to have to be done to fix and correct all of those mistakes of angle, distance, proportion, and so forth that could fall astray. And it's really easy for any of us to do that if we don't pay attention to what we're doing. Again, in this case, because I'm demonstrating, I'm more in tune with what I want to tell you as opposed to what I want to draw. So I'm really thinking about the words a little bit more. And the drawing is going on autopilot, but I didn't have the right kind of design set up early on. And now everything is corrected. All right. Thank you very much for coming in, checking all of this out. I hope this has helped you a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you can post those down below, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have or concerns that you have about how you draw hands, how you practice hands, how study is supposed to be for you, and so forth. Good luck with your studies. Take care and stay creative. I'll see you soon.